Is this the friendliest business class in the sky? Today we're flying Korean Air on a Boeing 787 in Prestige class, aka business class, where I found myself incredibly impressed by a really great seat design, fantastic service from the crew, but a bit underwhelmed by quite a few aspects that really held back the overall experience. So let's get going to see if Korean Air Prestige class is really worth the upgrade. It was quite an early morning start for this one, as Incheon Airport is about an hour's drive away from Seoul. The airport opened in 2001 as a replacement for the smaller Gimpo Airport, which had been struggling to keep up with the capacity of travellers coming to South Korea, and the whole thing was built on an artificially created piece of land between, alright, I'm going to do my best with the pronunciation here, Yeongjong and Yeongju Islands. But it was a very pleasant ride over, not too much traffic that morning. It was a bit foggy, which was making me a bit worried that there might be impacts on our flight, but that cleared up a good bit by the time we arrived at the airport. We made our way inside, and as we're flying in Prestige class today, which is what Korean Air calls their business class, we were able to go seek out the premium check-in desks. This was over to the right hand side of the check-in desks as we made our way in, and it was completely closed off from the other desks. Not much of a queue either, so we were very quickly checked in, handed over our bags, and we then made our way towards security. Check-in staff have been really friendly, which seemed to be the case for everyone who worked for Korean Air that we spoke to today. Unfortunately, no fast-track security provided at Incheon Airport, so we did have to join quite a long, snaking queue, and in fact the first security checkpoint we got to was too busy, so they sent us away to a different one which was further away, but that one turned out to also be packed full of people. And it didn't help that the room they had us queuing in was absolutely boiling. But eventually we were clear and we were able to make our way through towards the lounge. And there were two different lounges available to us. There's an East Lounge and a West Lounge. And from what I could tell online, the West Lounge seems to be a bit bigger than the East Lounge, but it is very similar. There doesn't seem to be any difference in terms of the food or amenities that you get. And as our gate looked to be closer to the East Lounge, we decided to head over to that one. Up the escalator and past the model plane, and we got over to reception where we were once again greeted by really friendly staff. And making our way into the lounge, first impressions weren't the best. It felt very overcrowded and very overheated when we first came in, with very few available seats, and the temperature in there soon had me sweating, which isn't great just before a flight. Although that situation certainly hadn't been helped by the long wait in the boiling hot security queue and the walk over to the lounge. I did acclimatise after a while, and we found that the seats nearer the entrance of the lounge were a bit cooler, and thankfully it did quieten out a little bit after a while, so we were able to get some of those seats. A good selection of drinks available from the bar, although as it was still pretty early, I was sticking with coffee for today, at least until we got on board. A decent selection of food from the buffet, nothing to get too excited about, and it wasn't a massive selection, but it was good enough quality. Coffee was from a machine rather than anything barista made from the bar, but it was pretty nice and gave me a very much needed caffeine hit. I did find it very unusual though that the only water was available came in these little cartons. Not something I would have expected to see in a business class lounge. But after a few rounds of coffees and some food, it was time to make our way to the gate and go get our flight. We really hadn't explored much of the airport before going to the lounge, we just came straight here from security, so I was quite surprised walking through the airport. It was a really nice space. When we got towards the gate area, it was big open windows where you had great views of the planes, plenty of seating around. There was also a few kid play areas, so if they're with a family that would be pretty handy, and just plenty of areas that seemed like there'd be a nice place to relax. To be honest, we kind of thought that this was a nicer area than the lounge itself, and I probably would recommend, and this is what we would do if we went back, we'd probably just go grab a bite to eat and a coffee in the lounge, and then head out and just enjoy some of the places around the airport. Unless you're going to be eating and drinking a lot in the lounge, there's much better places that you can be sat to enjoy your time whilst you wait. A little bit of a wait once we got to the gate before we were able to start boarding, but we were soon on our way. Down the escalator, and there was an easy to miss sign pointing Prestige class in one direction and economy the other. The person who had been ahead of us in the queue had actually missed that sign. He was actually in Prestige class with us, but he went the long way around back through economy, which meant that we got to be the first on board. The Prestige class layout on the 787-9 is in a 2-2-2. Middle seats are level with each other, so great for couples. The window seats are staggered, for a bit of additional privacy if you need it. We still chose the window seats as we wanted a view, and it's still easy enough to talk to each other in this position. Although I did manage to choose the row that has one less window, so don't make my mistake. The staggered layout means that both of us have direct aisle access, and on the seat was the pillow and bedding, and slippers were provided in the side storage area. The entertainment screen was looking a bit dated and was pretty small given the very long distance it is from my seat. This seat offers some of the best legroom I've had in business class from a seated position, with no foot cubby to worry about. The tray table pops out from this area at the side. It's a good size and pretty sturdy. Just ahead of that tray table you've got a universal power outlet for some charging. Not the most convenient location, Under my armrest to the right there was a small storage area which currently has the slippers in, and this also had a USB port for additional charging and the headphones. Seat controls were next to this, which we'll be trying out once we're in the air. My seat had this additional shelf, whereas Kelly's had this storage bin that was next to the window. It's quite nice that even though she's on the aisle side, she's still got a bit of a window view, even though it was a bit difficult to access. And even though Kelly was slightly behind me, it was still really easy to chat, but of course, if you don't know the person next to you, you can put this privacy divider up and then it does feel very private in here at the window. But of course we did keep that down for the whole flight. At the front of my seat there was an additional storage area that was just ahead of the footrest, quite handy space for shoes, and so far I was feeling really impressed with this seat. I was a bit disappointed I didn't have the additional window, but aside from that it was a great amount of space. It was even easy to get out the seat with the tray table deployed. You can just spin it around to create a bit of space, and then you do have direct aisle access. But again, one of the things that was standing out the most was the crew. They'd just been incredibly friendly when we boarded, made us feel very welcome, offered to take photos of us. And before departure we received some juice, some snacks, and they also brought us the landing cards to fill out for Japan, which is where we're heading today on a short flight over to Osaka. But once I got those forms completed, I turned my attention to the in-flight entertainment screen to see what we had on offer today. Way too far away to use the touchscreen, but thankfully there is a little remote that you can use to control this. Not the best remote, but it works okay. There's a decent selection, nothing too extensive. Didn't find too much on there that interested me. And given we do have a very short flight today, I figured that the flight map and the views out the window would be more than enough entertainment. Earphones were provided, didn't seem like they'd be anything special, but admittedly I didn't try them out. And the only other entertainment available was the in-flight magazines. No Wi-Fi available at all, which I was a bit surprised about. Thankfully we would be getting a full meal service and drinks included though, even though it's just a 1 hour flight. A pretty decent selection of drinks available, and the food was looking nice as well. The menu for our flight was on the left hand side, and then the right hand side had the menu that would be available on the flight back. I placed my order with the crew. Notably there was no choice of starter or dessert, but I was able to make a choice for the main course, and the safety demo then played as we pushed back for an on-time departure. As we make our way over to the runway, a quick word on the cost of today's flight. Unlike a lot of the videos on this channel, we actually didn't use points for this, we did just pay for this one with cash. Just over $500,000 Korean won per person, which worked out to about £300, a little bit less than that. I believe at the time of purchase it was around £280. That is a little steep for 1 hour of flight time, but they were scheduling it for 2.5 hours, and obviously you do have all the time of taxiing and waiting, so we're in the seat a lot longer than an hour, and it wasn't a huge uplift from the economy price, so we just thought it'd be worth paying to try it out. And we're really excited to get in the air and get going. The seat had really impressed us so far. It felt spacious, despite the fact that it's quite a dense cabin with the 222. It also felt quite private, despite the fact that the cabin also felt quite open. So although it was a bit dated in places, we really weren't bothered, and we're looking forward to getting in the air and experiencing the onboard service to see how that compares. Once up in the air I decided to kick off my shoes to get myself a bit more comfortable and decided to try out the slippers. Usually the slippers in these flights in Asia or in the hotels, they're never big enough, and unfortunately that was the case here as well, so I had to take these off and put my shoes back on to go and pop over to check out the loo. Not the biggest airplane bathroom, but it was kept nice and clean throughout the flight, and quite impressed to see it stocked with quite a few amenities. I don't know who on earth out there decides to have a shave on a 1 hour flight, but if you wanted to, it's available for you there. But yeah, I decided to skip that for today and just head back to my seat and go get myself comfortable. It is a little bit of a tight squeeze to get back in the seat through this access. It's just something to be wary of if you are a bit bigger. If you're likely to struggle through there, or if you have mobility issues, you might be better off on the ones that are on the aisle. I decided to have a bit of a play around with the recline features and get myself comfortable. Again, it's fantastic having so much space for your legs in a business class seat. I think it's really common these days to have a really narrow foot cubby when you've got your feet up, so having all this space is really nice, and I thought I'd try out to see what it was like in the lie flat bed mode. It's not the widest seat in the world, but I didn't find it particularly narrow either, it was just fine. And in a lie flat position it was very, very comfortable. Maybe a little bit short for me, I'm 6 foot, and I did find that when my head was at the top here, my feet were touching the bottom of this, but I did have my shoes on at the time, so with those off, I think I'd be absolutely fine. Particularly given the amount of space that I did have for my legs. Obviously given the length of this flight, I won't be sleeping today, but I do think I could sleep very well on a longer flight on this configuration. Worth noting though, if you are up the ones at the aisle, you don't have as much space, you do have a little bit of a foot cubby that goes underneath the TV. I didn't use the bedding on this flight, but there's quite a soft pillow and a pretty thick blanket as well that was available. Not sure how this compares to what they offer on longer flights though, so please do let me know in the comments if you tried them on a longer route, if that's the same bedding, because I do think I probably need a mattress pad and a bigger, firmer pillow for a good night's sleep on it. The onboard service started just as we started to get some incredible views out the window. I would love to tell you where exactly we were for this and where these views are of, but unfortunately my in-flight entertainment screen decided to break, so I wasn't able to view the map. Our starter and main course arrived all in one tray. So this was the beef bulgogi and the side salad. Doesn't look like the fanciest, most presentable food in the world, but it was very tasty, if not the most refined, and I washed it down with a whiskey highball. And the bread that accompanied the meal was very nice as well. Again, the crew provided a really friendly service, kept asking if there was anything else they could get us, and as soon as my main course was finished they brought me some fruit for dessert and they also offered me a coffee. Definitely not the most exciting in-flight dessert I've ever had. It doesn't get much more simple than a small fruit plate, but thankfully at least the fruit was all very high quality. This was a flight that overall went by way too quickly. Once that meal service was finished, it wasn't too long before we started our descent. But despite the relatively short length of the flight, it's one we'd really enjoyed, and as I edit this a few months after the flight, it's one I still look back on fondly, despite the fact that there's obviously a lot of limitations and things that weren't great about it. But let's start with the biggest pros. I think firstly, really loved the design of the seat. It felt very spacious and open while still delivering great privacy, and it was a very comfortable way to spend a flight. There were also incredible views out the window the entire flight as well. But I think one of the biggest highlights has to be the service from the crew. We'd had a really warm welcome on board, they saw us taking photos and offered to take some for us, they had some really pleasant small talk, incredibly cheerful and friendly, attentive without being overbearing, and they delivered very efficient meal service on what ended up being such a short amount of time in the air. They'd even asked if I wanted to be woken up for food if I happened to fall asleep on a 1-hour flight. The food had been okay, nothing fancy, exciting or overly impressive, and there was no choice of the starter or dessert. But I enjoyed what I was given, I ate pretty much everything. The tech and the entertainment was definitely a bit limited. The in-flight entertainment was quite small given the distance from the seats, and it stopped working halfway through the flight, and there was also no Wi-Fi. Obviously none of that is a big deal at all on a flight of this length, but certainly would be if you were flying this configuration on a longer route. It's worth noting as well the ground experience, which also holds back the overall experience that you have with Korean Air Prestige class. No fast track security provided at a very busy airport really slows things down, and the lounge experience was overcrowded, overheated, and overall pretty average. But despite those points, I wouldn't hesitate to fly Korean Air again. The seat design on this configuration and the comfort, along with the brilliant service from the crew, more than made up for any shortcomings, and it left us actually feeling really disappointed when the flight was over so soon, despite the fact that we were obviously very excited to land in Osaka. And we were soon disembarking, making our way through immigration, grabbing our bags, and jumping on the Hello Kitty train to get ourselves into Osaka. This flight with Korean Air has been part of 3 months of round the world travel, 1 month of which we spent in Asia. So if you're not already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of the other videos from that trip and everything else that I've got planned in the future. And if you want to see how Korean Air's business class compares with other carriers in the region, such as JAL or Cathay Pacific, then go ahead and watch one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.